They did me dirty. My brother-in-law, our company's safety manager, forged my ELD logs and pinned a fatal crash on me to save the boss and the insurance money. My name's Dale Hart. I'm 57 years old. And if you'll walk this highway with me for a bit, I'll show you how a broke truck driver with grease under his nails and a chip on his shoulder took his life back using time stamps, tire heat, and the kind of patience you only learn from watching white lines roll under your wheels at 2 a.m. I've been a roadman since back when we scribbled miles on paper and hoped the scale house was in a good mood. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and drop a comment where you're listening from. So that I can understand how far my story has reached. My CB handle used to be Bullfinch. Long story involving a red hat and an ill-advised Christmas party. And I've hauled everything that'll strap down. Lumber that smelled like a forest after rain, reefer loads humming like lullabies, and one time a whole trailer of rubber ducks that squeaked whenever I hit the rumble strips. My world was truck stop coffee that could strip paint, sunflower seeds, and State Route 50 blues you sing to keep your eyes open on I-80. I married into dispatch, which is a sentence I don't recommend. Randy fell in love with my sister Leanne in high school, then fell in love with power when our company, Silver Arrow Trucking, made him safety manager, a title that means chief finger pointer if you let it. He's the type with white sneakers that never scuff and a Bluetooth earpiece glued to his head, hollerin' in the break room about CSA scores like the alphabet owed him money. He was also my brother-in-law, which meant Sunday dinners with him talking metrics and me biting my tongue. But for 27 years, the road paid my bills and fed my pride. I knew my rigs by the sound of their Jake brakes. I knew which gas stations had clean showers and which had floors sticky enough to pull your boots off. I kept a photo of my girl Jess clipped to the visor. She ran the tire shop in town and could patch a flat faster than NASCAR. I had my rituals. Waffle House on Tuesdays, truck wash when I could afford it, a prayer whispered over the steering wheel near dawn, the way my old man taught me when he taught me the clutch. 2 winters ago, late February, the road bit back. The forecast said clear, but the Dakotas don't read forecasts, they write M. I was running a light load of insulation down to Nebraska, a goose feather compared to the steel I used to move, and I was on my second cup of Pilot coffee. Fuel stop at Sioux City on the brain. The wind was stepping sideways, that mean cross that makes your trailer think it's a kite. Snow started like spit and turned to sleet. I eased off the hammer, turned on the yellow flashers, and dropped 5 over 5 like my dad's ghost was riding shotgun. Somewhere past mile marker 203, a pickup up ahead lost its tail and kissed the median. I gave him room, came off cruise, and felt it thump thump thump, right steer starting to sing the wrong song. Blowout. I've had steer blowouts before. Your arms know before your brain does. I coaxed the wheel, kept her straight. And then a blue SUV cut left where left wasn't, trying to squeeze between me and a guardrail that had been there since Johnson was in office. There's only so much physics this world offers. He clipped my bumper, spun, and God help us, slipped under my trailer like a crab going under a rock. Everything went slow real then. My rig shuddered, but I kept it up, dragged brakes gentle instead of stamping like a fool, and brought 40 feet of steel and secrets to a stop in a patch of night throwing sparks like a 4th of July sparkler. Fire wasn't immediate. It never is like in the movies. It was steam, then smoke, then flame licking like a dog testing if the couch is off limits. I was out of the cab in 10 seconds, extinguisher in my hands, throat raw from yelling. Call 911. And back up. And somebody get me a knife. We cut seatbelts. We pulled 2 people out with shaking hands and hard prayers. One didn't make it. That sound you hear when a siren fades and a human doesn't breathe anymore? It'll ride with you. It rides with me still. Troopers came, EMS did their work, and I stood there on the shoulder with my hands black and my cheeks wet and my heart like a fist in my throat. A highway camera stared at me from a pole like a quiet judge. It was awful. It was also an accident. That's what I told myself when they put me in the back of a squad car for warmth and questions. I told the officer about the blowout. I told him about the pickup. I told him about the crosswind and the ice. He nodded and wrote like a man clocking a story he's heard in a dozen dialects. He took my ELD tablet like it was a holy book. By sunrise, the story had changed. It wasn't a blowout and an SUV in a wind. It was driver fatigue. It was violation of hours of service. It was Hart had been on duty 15 hours when he should have been parked. And how did they know? Because the logs said so. The logs said I'd been driving since before dawn with 3 hours off at a truck stop, which didn't show on my gas receipts, which, go figure, were missing from the envelope on my passenger seat because somebody in the chaos of the wreck tossed the envelope into the bedlam, which I didn't notice because I was trying to keep a stranger breathing on the concrete. I called Randy from the trooper's cell phone because mine had died. It rang once. He answered on the bounce. "Dale," he said, clipped and official. "Oh man, I had a blowout," I said. "They're saying I was over on hours." "We'll handle it," he said instantly. "We'll get the ECM download. We'll get the dash cam. We'll," he paused. "You know you missed your 30 by 15 yesterday." "No, I didn't," I said, hearing the edge in my own voice. "I took it at the Sapp brothers. You sent me that goofy meme about a cat that looked like you." Silence. Then, okay. He went in to take charge tone, the same one he used when the softball grill needed more propane. "Stay put. Don't say anything. We'll have our lawyer. We'll fix this." He didn't fix it. He nailed the lid. Here's the thing folks outside trucking don't know. The ELD electronic logging device ain't just a digital notebook. It's a leash and a witness and a liability all in one. Dispatch can reassign driving, add notes, categorize time as personal conveyance, or yard move, or on duty not driving. There's supposed to be an audit trail, who edited what, when. But sometimes that trail is a dirt path in the rain. Sometimes it's flat out paved over. When my safety manager brother-in-law sent the fleet logs to the troopers, it showed a beautiful lie. I'd started driving at 3:17 a.m. from a truck stop one state over. I'd blown past my 11. I'd ignored a 30-minute break. I'd been told to stop and keep going anyway. There were even notes. Driver insisted on continuing despite fatigue. And the signature on those notes, that little digital initials that say, "Whose device typed this," read DH. Dale Hart. Me. "Those aren't my edits," I said. I said it calmly in the interview room with the coffee that tastes like burned toast. I said it again in a deposition later, sitting in a suit that felt like borrowed skin. I said it to my sister across her kitchen table with her eyes red and pitiful and tired. "Randy," I told her, "changed my logs." "Why would he do that?" she whispered. "And what do you say?" "Because he needed a fall guy. Because the company needed the wreck to be human error and not mechanical failure. The insurer hates blowouts when they smell negligence on maintenance. Because if the boss is at risk, the safety guy gets fired. Because somebody has to be the story, and the family ties don't matter when the CFO is staring at a spreadsheet with blood on it. They hung that fatality on me. There was a civil suit. The family of the man who died. Their grief was right, their lawyers were sharp, the optics were terrible. Tired driver, forged or not, is a headline you can hang a whole argument on. The county DA made noise about criminal negligence. I didn't go to prison, but I lost my CDL. Silver Arrow disavowed me in a press release that leaned heavy on regrettable, isolated, under review. They kept my last paycheck to offset damages. The bank took my Peterbilt. Randy didn't lose his job. He kept showing up in white sneakers talking about metrics. And my mother started using a different pew at church. You can either drown or get a toolbox. I chose tools. I took the only job anybody would give me at a truck stop off 29, cleaning showers and scrubbing gum out of parking lot gravel with a stiff brush. Classy, right? I wore a name tag that said Dale in letters font like a diner menu. I learned the night manager's kids' names. I fixed a lot of paper towel dispensers. And from midnight to 4 a.m., between plunging a toilet and refilling the jerky rack, I sat at a back table with a beat-up laptop Jess scrounged from a salvage auction, and I learned everything a man can about ELDs without subpoenas. This ain't a tech channel, but here's the short of it. ELDs have audit logs, immutable ones. The FMCSA mandates those. They record every edit, who did it, what device ID, what IP address, timestamp to the second. Dispatch can make explanatory notes, but they can't erase the trail. And while companies like to export only the driver-facing report, the back end has more than they ever share, especially if you don't know to ask. There are other witnesses that don't lie. Toll tags, weigh station cameras, the chicken coops run by folks who've seen it all, diesel pump transactions, tire temps logged by certain fancy TPMS systems, even the coffee receipt with the "Welcome to Kansas City" printed on it at 7:37 a.m. when your log claims you were in Sioux Falls at dawn. The world is a clock. You just gotta read it. I filed a complaint with the FMCSA. There's a form hidden like a rabbit hole on their site for allegations of ELD manipulation. I filed a data QS challenge for my crash entry, attaching the only proof I had then. A text from Jess timestamped at 6:04 a.m. You still at SAP? Bring me those honey buns later. Which, yes, is love. It wasn't going to save me, but it started a trail with my name on it. I also filed a Freedom of Information request, not for some federal memo, but for weigh station photos on the night in question. A lot of folks don't know you can do that. The response took months. I scrubbed 3,000 showers in that time. You can't take down a machine by yourself. You need a crew. Mine showed up where crews always do, at odd hours, tired, honest, and a little mad at the world. First was Mendez, Trooper Lila Mendez, to be Sunday about it. She worked commercial enforcement at the coop down at mile 184. She'd seen every plating scheme and every "my ELD is glitching" swear story there is. She liked truth and cinnamon rolls. I brought the second. She brought the first. She told me straight. Guys get stuck under logs all the time. But if you say someone edited yours, you better bring receipts, heart. I told her I would. Second was Caleb, goes by Radio. Ham radio nerd, YouTuber who fixes old CBs for the joy of it. He had a side hustle doing fleet installations for smaller outfits, which meant he knew the inside of ELD software better than the sales reps did. He showed me where the immutable logs live and how to read an XML that looks like a robot had a stroke. He also laughed louder than anybody I've met. It helps. Third was Ellen, a paralegal at a PI firm who came in for coffee every night at 2 a.m. after working late on the kind of cases where a minivan gets sideswiped and nobody says sorry. She looked at my stack of notes, my calendar squares, the knitting of my timeline, and said, "You're 2 subpoenas away from an answer." I said, "I can't get subpoenas." She said, "Not alone." She slid me a card. On it was the name of a lawyer who hates bullies, the exact temperament you need in a friend. Then there was Duke, owner-operator, gray beard, baseball cap from a defunct trucking school. Laugh lines like crow's feet drew highways on his face. He'd worked for Silver Arrow back when the world was analog. He'd left because Randy read him the riot act for refusing to pull a hot load after 5 on, and Duke doesn't do anything he doesn't want to do. He said, "I'll pull a sting if it helps." I said, "That's a big stick to swing." He grinned. "I ain't got much to lose except my temper." I saved money like a squirrel saves acorns, spent it on filing fees, and asked my lawyer to file a civil suit. Wrongfully terminated defamation and spoliation of evidence. That's fancy for y'all messed with the data. Discovery, the part where each side has to hand over documents, was my pry bar. Silver Arrow produced all logs related to the date in question. It was a nice, sanitized PDF. We asked for native files. Mendez wrote us a letter on letterhead that said, essentially, "This is how an audit looks. Where are the back-end XMLs?" Ellen prepped the motion. The judge, bless the odd mercy of the world, granted it. Silver Arrow had to hand over the raw ELD exports from the vendor portal. Dated. Time-stamped. Footprints. Caleb came over that night with pizza and a laptop. We loaded the XML and watched the guts spill in code. There it was in black and curly braces. An edit on duty status at 5:52 a.m. Central Standard Time, 3 hours before the crash. User ID, lane@silverrowtrucking.com. IP address, a block owned by their office provider. Comment, correcting driver oversight. Then a second edit, 20 minutes after the crash, reassigning unassigned driving to DH, again with Lane's ID. We didn't cheer. We sat quietly. each with a piece of pizza going cold in our hands, and felt that cold lightning that splits a tree clean. The device put his initials to the knife he stuck in my back. We kept pulling. The way station FOIA came back. A blurry photo of my rig rolling past the coop at 6:37 a.m. The log says I was still in South Dakota then. Toll tag data from Kansas City. 29 at 7:09 a.m. gas receipt from Sapp Brothers. Duplicate copy printed by a manager who remembered Jess because she'd given him grief about the ATM fee. It all made a braid. But I didn't want compensation. Not at first. I wanted the story to change in the place where stories matter. The regulatory file and the front page of a small-town paper. We planned a second front. Duke volunteered to go back undercover, sort of. Not deep cover, more like just enough to get a man comfortable. He walked into Silver Arrow with his hat in his hand and his voice humble. "You know," he told Randy, "I'm between contracts. I can run hot if you need. I got a reset built up." Randy, fool, smiled like a tailor seeing a big man coming into his shop. He put Duke on an overnight load with a too-tight window. He texted, "Use PC from the receiver to the shipper. We'll fix it on the back end." He put a smiley face. That's how the devil writes. Duke had Mendez and the Attorney General's office listening on a warrant. He had his phone set to screen record. He had a dash cam with audio. We had the stupid mind out of their own pocket. 2 days later, while Duke was running, I emailed the FMCSA state office with a subject line they couldn't ignore. ELD Audit log evidence of falsification. See attached, XML plus screen recordings. I CC'd the company's insurance adjuster. The one who'd sent me a letter 3 months after the crash offering me a settlement, so insulting I laughed for an hour. I CC'd our local paper, the Valley Gazette, attention to a reporter named Witt who once wrote a front-page story about a lost dog that read like a John Steinbeck chapter. So I knew he had heart. I attached a simple timeline in big letters even a politician could read. While this pot simmered, I did something that took more spine than busting a knuckle on a lug nut. I went to see the family of the man who died. His wife, Jen, met me in her living room with a couch that had seen better days and a kid coloring in the corner. I didn't bring a lawyer. I brought 2 coffees and my hat in my hand. "I ain't here to beg forgiveness," I told her. "I'm here to say I'm doing everything I can to make the truth what stands. You got lied to too." She listened. She didn't know me that, but she did. Grief makes people braver than you think. I showed her the screen grabs with the dull gray of an audit log and the tiny letters of a username that looked a lot like a man's fingerprints. She cried quiet. I cried too. Sometimes revenge looks like courtroom fireworks. Sometimes it looks like 2 people sitting with hurt and deciding not to let a lie be the last word. She called her lawyer. He called Ellen. The braid got thicker. The state rolled in quiet. Compliance reviews don't put up banners. They show up with clipboards and rules, and the cologne of consequence. Mendez and a man with a haircut so sharp I could have used it to cut strapping tape knocked on Silver Arrow's glass door at 8:01 a.m. on a Tuesday. They said, "We need your driver qualification files, maintenance records, and raw ELD data for the past 12 months. Randy went the color of an unbaked biscuit. He texted the boss. He called the IT guy, one of those kids who looks 12 and says bro a lot. He smiled a lot for men who weren't smiling back. I didn't go that day. Jess wouldn't let me. "Let em pay attention to someone else's face," she said, smudging grease on my cheek with a thumb like lipstick. "You show up when it's time." The Gazette ran Witt's story the next morning above the fold. Audit logs suggest logbook tampering in fatal crash. FMCSA probes Silver Arrow. He kept it clean, quoted everybody he could, put the word alleged where the word lying was itching to go. He used the word spouse. He used the word brother-in-law. Folks read that part twice. Randy texted me for the first time in a year. "We need to talk." I met him where all bad conversations happen in our town, behind the bowling alley where the smokers go. He wore his clean sneakers, and his face was a bad map. He started with a line I'd heard him use on drivers who'd rolled a tire into a ditch. "This is all a misunderstanding." I held up a printout, his edits, his email, his IP. "You typed your name into my life, and you did it to save your own. I looked him in the eye so hard I felt it in my shoulders. There's a man in the ground, and you put your thumb on the scale. He sagged like a tent with a broken pole. The boss made me, he said. He said we'd lose everything. He said you'd take the fall anyway because, he stopped. Because I'm a driver, I finished for him. Because the world sees tired and calls it sin when the system calls it standard. He cried then. I didn't expect it, and it didn't move me. He'd practiced that face in the mirror. I can fix it, he said, small. I can call the adjuster, You can shut your mouth, I said, not loud, not mean, just done. The adults are working. FMCSA did what FMCSA does when the evidence is bright and the paperwork is lazy. They dropped a conditional rating on Silver Arrow like a piano out a 12th floor window. Then they started counting dark marks, falsified logs, hours of service pressure, maintenance intervals lied about. The insurer, who'd been happy to blame the lone driver, realized their exposure looked like the Grand Canyon if a jury saw a dispatched text with a smiley face. They sent lawyers who say mitigate like normal people say hello. The boss fired Randy to make a show of it, like tossing a steak to a mad dog, but the steak was rotten and the dog had a badge. The DA, who had posed too tight in his headshot and loved the word accountability, called my lawyer. He said, we'd like to revisit the driver negligence angle. Ellen said, we'd like you to revisit it publicly on letterhead. He did. It wasn't an apology. Departments don't do those. But it was something with a seal on it that used my name next to the words, no longer considered at fault. My CDL reinstatement came with a stamp, and when I held that piece of plastic with my face on it again, I felt like a man getting his name back off a lost dog's collar. I probably could have sued everybody. Jess wanted me to buy a lake house and a boat big enough to make our pastor raise his eyebrows. We took a settlement from the insurer that would pay my bills for a while and fund something better than a boat. We gave a chunk to Jen and her kid with a card that said exactly 8 words. I'm sorry. He should still be here. Dale. Money doesn't touch grief. But I wasn't going to let a company write the only check in that story. We also turned around and did something I wish someone had done for me when I was 25 and too proud to ask questions. We opened a little one-room school over by the truck stop. I called it the Logbook. Name's corny on purpose. We put a sign out front I painted myself because I like paint and I like signs and I'm stubborn. Inside, under fluorescent lights and a fan that squeaks like a mouse learning opera, we teach drivers how to read their own data, how to download raw ELDs, how to match a toll receipt to a duty status change, how to file a complaint without a lawyer just to put a pebble in a boot. Mendez comes by on Thursdays when she can and answers questions without writing anyone up because that ain't the point. Radio does a class on what your ELD doesn't want you to know. Ellen brings donuts and explains discovery like she's teaching 5th graders. And that's a compliment. 5th graders are smarter than most adults you meet in a boardroom. Sometimes Duke parks his rig out back and tells young bucks about learning the hard way with paper logs and a console light and a pen that doesn't write in the cold. He calls me boss. I call him friend. We swap those words because they're the right shape for what we've been through. And Randy, he pled to obstruction of justice and falsifying records. No orange jumpsuit on the evening news. Just a press release on a county website and 3 years of probation and a fine big enough to make him sell the base boat. He works at a call center now selling internet to folks who'd rather be left alone. He sent me a letter handwritten in blue ink, asked me to forgive him. I wrote back 3 sentences. You did a cowardly thing to a brave day. The hurt you caused will ripple longer than you meant. I won't spend the rest of my life carrying you. I'm not gonna lie. There were nights when revenge tasted like beer, and I wanted to throw a rock through the Silver Arrow sign. There were afternoons when I drove past their now empty lot. Conditional ratings do that to contracts. And I felt a mean joy that made me ashamed. You don't get to choose all your feelings. You get to choose what you do with them. I chose to build a place where a 20-year-old can show me his ELD app and say, they tried to stick me with unassigned driving, but look, I got the IP. And then grin like he just built a treehouse. That grinning is the counterweight to bad motives. On Sundays at 6, the hour my sister used to set her pot roast in the middle of the table, and tell us she undercooked it when it was fine. I park my pickup on a bluff above the river and watch the semis crawl like ants across the bridge. There's always a moment where a rig climbs the grade and you can hear the Jake brake bark bounce off the water. It's the sound of control, of making something heavy move in the direction you want. I sip coffee Jess stacked too much sugar into, and I raise the cup to the man I couldn't save, and to every driver who'll never know we caught a bad man with a smiley face text. If you're still here, thanks for riding along. Maybe somebody did you dirty. Maybe they wore your blood last name and told you to be reasonable. Maybe they trapped you in a story and handed you a villain mask. Hear me, you don't beat M by yelling at the scale house. You beat M by learning where the clock is. Who edited what? How to ask the record to stand up and introduce itself. You beat M by outlasting and outreading and outloving the folks who got hurt. If this lit a little pilot in you, drop a comment and tell me where you're stuck. Share this with the stubborn friend who says, "That's just how it is." Subscribe if you want more true stories about ordinary Americans doing arithmetic on injustice until the numbers add up to something you can live with. I'm Dale Hart. I'm 57. I still miss the rhythm of a 12-speed floating up a grade with a good song on. I still keep a tire thumper in the cab because old habits have grip strength. I don't chase revenge like a dog chases his tail anymore. I let it walk beside me, quiet, like a well-trained healer. And when it's time to speak, I let the logs do the talking. Sometimes the loudest justice is a siren. Mine was a timestamp. And if you listen close enough, the truth keeps time like a metronome, steady, unafraid, waiting for you to count along.